All right. So we're sitting here at about 8 o'clock. We have 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13 people on, it looks like. So as more people maybe get up here and get going, they can follow along too. So if at any point your internet kind of cuts out or you get kicked off, this meet is being recorded. Okay, so as soon as I later on during the day, I'll post the recording. I'll have to kind of cut out some of the beginning parts and stuff like that where we're just sitting around waiting. But I'll do that, and then I'll post that onto Schoology. So I'll make a sort of an assignment on Schoology that says like Digital Day from January 14th, and then I'll post the video in there. So like I said, if you end up getting kicked off or the connection's not very good or you can't follow along, you can go ahead and do that, watch that video for anything that you missed. Okay. Otherwise, I'll be assuming that I'll be checking your notebooks on Tuesday when you come back to school. Remember, there's no school Monday, so I'll check your notebooks when you come back to school on Tuesday and check you off if you completed the assignment or not. And if you haven't, we'll have to submit your name to the office for non-completion. So then they kind of take it from there. All right. So let's take a look at our, everybody should have their notebooks at home. So if you haven't already, go ahead and take that out. Make sure that you have a pencil, something to write with. All right. So yesterday we were looking at the couple pages in our notebooks, pages 126. Genevieve, did you need something? You guys can type in the chat too if you don't want to talk. Okay, I'll assume not. All right, so let's see here again. Sorry. All right, so yesterday we were looking at the data from those different cities and those locations. And you guys should have those recorded. So I'm going to pull this up here. If you did not get all of these down, make sure you do that right now. All right, so as far as the two sets of cities is kind of what we're looking at. So we're looking at the two Alaska cities together, the two California cities, or the San Diego El Centro California cities together, and the San Francisco Modesto California cities together. So if we look at, let's start with like Homer and Bethel, Alaska. So you'll notice right here, okay, that their latitudes are pretty similar. They're about 1 degree off or a little bit more, but that's really like not a huge deal in terms of climate. And we've learned before that if you're right around the same latitude, you should have the same climate, okay? Longitude, as we know, does not make a huge difference when it comes to climate. So I'm not going to really need that for comparisons, right? The next one I want to compare are these two numbers here. Homer is 0 kilometers from the ocean, which means that it is right at the coast. And Bethel is 96 kilometers inland, which is about 60, 50 miles or so inland. Okay, so that's how far it is away from the coast. Now we want to look at our data that we collected. Okay, so precipitation. Alaska, Homer, Alaska gets 64.6, and Bethel, Alaska gets 38.8. So the one that's on the coast seems to get almost twice as much precipitation as the one that's inland. Okay, so that's an interesting thing. Let's see if that trend continues. And then we have over here the temperature ranges, these two right here. Again, temperature range is from its highest average temperature to its lowest average temperature. So along the coastline, Homer, Alaska has a temperature range of only 17.2 degrees throughout the year. So it stays more consistent, doesn't get too cold, doesn't get too warm. But Bethel, Alaska has a temperature range of 27.5. So that's 10 degrees more. So what that means is that there is more variation. It's colder, and it gets much colder in Alaska, and it also might get warmer in Bethel, Alaska. All right. So that's the trend right now, is that we see that there is more precipitation on the coast city, and there is a smaller temperature range. Let's see if that continues. So let's look at San Diego versus El Centro, the white line boxes here. Okay, same latitude, longitude, you don't worry about distance to ocean. Okay, San Diego right on the coast, El Centro inland. Okay, about 100 or so, 144 kilometers. Take a look at their precipitation, right? The coastal city right here, San Diego, gets 30.4 inches or centimeters, and El Centro only gets 7.5 centimeters. Think about that. 7.5 centimeters is really small, okay? That's maybe like, I don't know, maybe smaller than the length of your hand for sure. So that's a pretty small number, 30.4 for San Diego though. So that trend has continued. Up here, the coastal city got the most rain too. And then over here, as far as our temperature range, the one that had the smaller temperature range was San Diego. All right. And then we have a 20.3 degree temperature range for El Centro. Again, both of those hold true for this. Let's check our third location, San Francisco versus Modesto. Again, we have San Francisco being right on the coast, Modesto being inland. The annual precipitation, San Francisco gets quite a bit more in terms of precipitation. And their temperature range, look, it only varies by 6.4 degrees. So that means like all throughout the year, it's pretty much the same temperature all year long. It only varies by 6 degrees or so. Whereas Modesto has a variation of 17.5. Okay. So in all three locations, sets of locations, we see the same trend. Precipitation is higher on the coast, and the temperature range is smaller on the coast. All right. And then the opposites are true as well. Inland gets less rain, and inland cities also have a greater variation in terms of temperatures. So now I had you glue this page into your notebook. So go ahead and turn to that. All right, so I want you to look at question number 1. How does the distance from the ocean seem to affect the temperature range of the cities? All right, so distance from ocean, and how does that affect the temperature range? So we're looking at that last column. So we said that we saw that if they were right on the coast, they had a low temperature range, 17, 19, 9, 6. And if they were away from the coast, away from the ocean, that their temperature range was larger. So we'll go ahead and write that. So closer to ocean equals lower temp range. Farther from ocean equals higher temp range. Okay. Not necessarily that like the temperatures are always higher, but they certainly can be. It just means that the range is higher. So your lows are lower, your highs are higher, usually in your cities that are farther from the ocean. All right. So number 2 says, what conclusion can we draw about the relationship between distance from ocean and the temperature range? Okay. So with this one, we would want to, kind of similar to what we kind of said here, that if cities closer to oceans have lower temperature ranges. Okay. And in parentheses, what I'm going to kind of put here is I'll put milder weather. So again, usually what this indicates is that since the temperature range is low, that they get, again, don't get too hot or too cold. They pretty much stay at a very similar temperature all year long. Now, the Alaska one does, vary quite a bit because it's Alaska and it's cold up there kind of no matter what, but it's just not as cold as places that are inland. All right, so 3 and 4 are going to be asking us about precipitation. So 3 says, what do you notice about the annual precipitation for cities close to the ocean compared to those of similar latitude and elevation farther inland? So same type of question that I'm going to answer here. So I'm going to kind of have this set up like 2 bullet points like I did for number 1. All right, so the trend that we saw was that if they are closer to ocean, they have more precipitation. I'm just going to abbreviate precipitation, precip. And the opposite is true as well. Farther, just put inland, less precip. All right. So number 4, kind of the same thing as we did for 2. What conclusion can we draw about the relationship between distance from the ocean and your annual precipitation? So I'm going to kind of use the same wording as I did for number 2. So cities closer to ocean have more precipitation. Cities inland. So cities closer to the ocean have more precipitation than cities inland. And we saw that again in each one of those locations, there was a significant difference. It's not like a couple centimeters difference. It's, upwards of 10 centimeters or more difference in terms of precipitation. And that can mean, quite a few different things for people. So number 5 here, what do you think causes the relationship you identified in items 2 and 4? So what causes our temperature range at the coast to be lower, more mild, kind of similar ranges all year long? And what causes them to have more precipitation? So there's 2 answers to this question. There's an answer for why the temperature ranges are more, mild throughout the year, and there's an answer for the precipitation. So we're going to have to kind of do, again, 2 bullet points for this one here. All right, so let's do the temperature range first. Okay, so the reason that the temperature ranges are more mild here is because, if you guys remember, we have a difference between how land and how water heats up. So remember that water heats up slowly and it also keeps its temperature. So ocean water tends to stay pretty similar in temperature throughout the year. It doesn't vary nearly as much as the temperature on land. Okay, so ocean temperature stays around the same temps all year. And remember that because the ocean water has a certain temperature, that is going to make the air have a certain temperature because it's going to transfer its heat to the air, right? This affects air air temps around coastal cities. So the ocean temp stays around the same temperature all year long because water doesn't heat up or lose its heat nearly as much as land does. And that affects the air temperatures around coastal cities, keeping them relatively mild, not a lot of changes throughout the year. As I said, Homer, Alaska does still have a range of 17.2, but that's not nearly as much as the inland city of Bethel, which was 27. All right, and then the last thing that we're going to do today is the other part of this. So what does this have to do with precipitation? Well, if you remember, precipitation comes from, condensation, which comes from evaporation, right? And over the oceans, there's a lot of evaporation, which turns into a lot of condensation, which turns into a lot of precipitation. So it's generally rainier, and we get more precipitation around coastal cities. All right. So oceans evaporate lots of water to the air, which condenses into clouds and forms precipitation. Now, those clouds will sort of fizzle out by the time they make their way inland. So right along the coast is where you get the majority of the rain and precipitation. But as soon as they, keep going inland, then they start to disappear because they don't have that ocean water to supply their clouds with water vapor anymore. So that's why cities inland are drier, because they're too far away from the coast to get this precipitation. It's all gone by the time it gets there. All right. So that is all I have for you today. I will stay up here till you finish writing this down, or you're welcome to take a screenshot of this if you wanted to move on. But otherwise, you are free to go. You have a little break before your next class. So as soon as you get this written down, you may leave, and I will see you Tuesday.